The wind howled across the frozen tundra, cutting through the endless white expanse like the claws of some unseen beast. Snowflakes, sharp as needles, stung Alara's face as she pressed on, each step heavier than the last. Her heart pounded with exhaustion, and the bitter cold made every breath feel like a struggle. The night was dark, the sky swallowed by thick swirling clouds that blocked out the moon. But she kept moving, driven by something deeper than the fear of the storm. Alara was alone. She had always been alone, a lone Omega, cast aside by the very pack she had been born into. Her mother had been an Omega too, weak, shunned and discarded as easily as an old piece of cloth. Alara had inherited nothing but her mother's bloodline. She had never known love from her pack, nor had she ever felt the warmth of family. The other wolves avoided her, the alphas feared her, and the betas barely acknowledged her existence. But now, with each step through the blizzard, she felt something stir inside her. Not hope, and that had long since died, but something else. A strange pull, something she couldn't explain, pulling her deeper into the heart of the storm. She had been walking for what felt like hours when she first saw it. At first, it was a shadow, barely visible against the blinding white. She squinted against the wind, trying to make out the shape. It was large, bigger than any wolf she had ever seen, and it was lying still in the snow, not moving, not even twitching. Fear crept up Alara's spine, but she couldn't bring herself to turn away. The shadow slowly took shape as she drew closer. A massive wolf, its fur dark as night, was lying motionless in the snow. Blood stained the white ground beneath it, and the creature's sides rose and fell weakly, struggling to breathe. Its body was covered in wounds, the most grievous one seeping black poison from a deep gash near its side. The air around the wolf hummed with an ancient energy that made Alara's heart skip. She had heard stories about the wolves of the royal pack, the ones tied to the Alpha King himself. The wolf before her had the unmistakable scent of royal blood. It was one of King Alaron's sacred wolves. But why was it here in the middle of the blizzard? And why was it alone, so near death? Alara knelt beside the creature, her fingers trembling as she reached out. The moment her skin brushed its fur, a rush of warmth flooded through her, not from the wolf but from something deep within herself. Her mind whirled with confusion, but instinct took over. She had no choice now but to help. The royal wolves were sacred, revered. They were never harmed by outsiders, let alone abandoned. This one had been poisoned. That much was clear. But by who and why? Alara! The voice came from the wind, low and haunting. Her heart skipped again, but she couldn't stop. The voice felt too familiar and yet too distant, like a whisper from another time. It wasn't the wolf's voice. No, this was something deeper. Alaron's voice, but Alaron wasn't here. He couldn't be. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. It was the cold, she told herself. The isolation. Her mind was playing tricks. She focused on the wolf again, checking its wounds carefully. The poison was spreading fast, dark veins creeping from the gash and moving toward its heart. She had seen such poison before in the blood of a pack that had been decimated by a rival alpha. It was rare, and it was lethal. Alara, save me, the voice again. This time it was unmistakable. It was Alaron's voice. It was coming from the wolf. The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment Alara couldn't breathe. Her mind spun, caught between disbelief and something far darker, something ancient. Alaron, the Alpha King, was not just a man. He was bound to the wolves, to the pack, to the land itself. But this was impossible. She had no choice. Alara's fingers brushed the poisoned wound, and a strange energy filled her hands. Her blood burned as her gift, her cursed gift, activated. Her healing powers were rare, too rare. They were the very reason she had been abandoned by her own pack, feared for the unnatural ability to mend wounds and cure sickness. Omega wolves were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be slaves to the Alpha. But Alara had never been like the others, and in that moment she understood why. The wolf stirred, its eyes opening just slightly, glowing faintly in the dark. Alara, the voice whispered again, this time more urgent. Help me! With no time to waste, Alara gathered all of her strength and pressed her hands against the wound. Her magic flared to life, pulsing through her like a river of fire. She channeled the energy, pulling the poison from the wolf's body, sending it into the earth beneath them. The process was slow. Her hands burned, her body trembled, and the storm outside seemed to grow even fiercer. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. As the last of the poison left the wolf's body, a low growl rumbled from its chest, not of pain but of recognition. Ilara leaned back, wiping the sweat from her brow. The wolf's breathing had steadied, and its wounds had closed, though it still lay unconscious in the snow. Her legs felt weak, her strength drained. But she had done it. She had saved him. As the blizzard raged around them, Ilara realized something she hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just any wolf. This was his wolf. King Alaron's wolf, the one who had come to her in the storm, whispering her name. The wind howled louder, and the snow swirled around her like a curtain of white. But in that moment, Ilara knew she wasn't alone. And whatever this bond was, whatever fate had brought her to this moment, she would never be the same again. The storm had not let up. The wind howled louder than ever, and snow continued to fall in heavy, swirling gusts. But inside the ruins of the ancient temple, the world felt distant. Ilara could barely hear the wind now. Her only focus was the wolf lying before her, the dark creature she had saved, or so she hoped. The flickering light from the fire she had started cast long, trembling shadows on the stone walls, making the ancient carvings appear as though they were watching her. The wolf lay on its side, breathing slowly but steadily. It had been hours since she had healed it, yet it hadn't moved, hadn't opened its eyes. Ilara's hand still burned with the after effects of her magic, a constant reminder of the toll her gift took on her body. She hadn't been able to heal the poison completely in one go. It was too strong, too powerful. The wolf had been on the brink of death. Ilara's mind was still reeling from what had happened outside. The storm, the wolf, and then the voice. She couldn't shake the strange feeling that something had shifted between them, something deeper than just a healer and her patient. Alaron's wolf. It was impossible. King Alaron, the mighty Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom, had no reason to be near these cursed lands. His pack ruled from the royal palace, far from where Ilara roamed. The two of them were from different worlds, separated by power, pride, and station. And yet here she was, alone in a crumbling temple with his wolf, the very symbol of his reign. Ilara, the voice again, this time clearer than before. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked down at the wolf. Its eyes were still closed, but she could swear she had heard his voice. Alaron's voice. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to make sense of it all. The wolf stirred, its massive form shifting slightly. Ilara jumped back, startled, but the creature didn't open its eyes. It let out a soft groan, its body trembling under the strain of healing. Ilara. It was no longer a whisper. It was almost a command. She leaned forward cautiously, her breath shaky as she gazed into the wolf's eyes, now open and glowing with an ethereal light. The same energy that had filled her hands during the healing now radiated from the creature, a bond that she couldn't explain. She had seen magic before, but this was different. It felt personal, like the wolf itself was alive in a way that defied nature. Ilara. The voice spoke again, but this time it was clearer, closer. The wolf's mouth didn't move, but Ilara could feel the words in her mind. Who are you? She whispered, more to herself than to the wolf. The wolf's gaze held her, and for a moment everything else seemed to fade away. The storm, the ruins, the kingdom that was so far removed from this place. It all melted into the background. All that was left was the strange connection between them. The wolf let out a low growl, a sound not of warning, but of recognition. It was as though it knew her, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Ilara. The voice was stronger now, commanding. But there was something else behind it, something deeper, something vulnerable. You are the one. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. The one for what? The one to save him? To save Alaron? Her mind raced, but the wolf's eyes seemed to calm her. She could feel the weight of its presence, of its power, and yet there was a quiet sorrow in its gaze, as if it had seen too much, had lived too long in a world of war, blood, and politics. The storm outside grew louder, its fury echoing off the temple walls. But inside all was still. The fire crackled in the hearth, and the wolf's breath, shallow at first, began to steady. It was healing. Slowly but surely. Ilara stood up, her legs trembling from the effort of healing the creature. She had to stay strong. She had to remember who she was, a lone omega, an outcast. A healer, yes, but nothing more. She was nothing to a king, to a royal bloodline. She would never be more than the healer that saved his wolf. But still, something inside her stirred. A longing. A strange sense of fate. She couldn't deny it. Her thoughts were interrupted when the wolf shifted again, groaning softly. This time its eyes stayed open, glowing with a faint light that seemed to pulse with life. And then it spoke again. "Ilara, the king, he is dying." The words hit her like a cold wave. She stumbled back, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. The king, Alaron. The Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom was dying? What do you mean? Ilara's voice trembled barely above a whisper. He's the Alpha. He's invincible. The wolf let out another low growl as though reminding her of the truth. No, he is cursed. The poison. It was meant for him. His enemies want him weak. Without the wolf, he cannot survive. And without you, the wolf paused, its eyes flashing with a deep intensity. Ilara, you must go to him. You must save him. He cannot rule without you, and you cannot live without him. The word sent a chill down Ilara's spine. She backed away, her head spinning. She had barely even understood what was happening, and now the wolf was telling her that her fate was somehow tied to the king. She had no choice but to return to the kingdom. She could feel it deep in her bones. She had saved the wolf, but Alaron's fate rested on her shoulders. The weight of it was suffocating. She had no desire to be part of his world. She had no desire to walk among kings and queens where power and bloodlines meant more than life itself. But the wolf was right. She had no choice. The storm was still raging outside, but Ilara knew what she had to do. She gathered her things and turned away from the wolf, who watched her with those glowing eyes. Unblinking. Go to him. The wolf's voice echoed in her mind. And with that, Ilara left the ruins of the temple, the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. She had saved the wolf, but now she had to face the Alpha King. As she stepped back into the blizzard, the wind howling around her, Ilara knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just a lone Omega. The storm that raged outside was nothing compared to the storm inside her heart. Ilara had never felt so out of place. The cold wind stung her face as she stood in front of the gates of the royal palace, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens like silent sentinels. The weight of the stone walls pressed in on her, the kingdom's power and pride radiating from every corner. But all Ilara felt was smallness. She had never been part of this world, and she never wanted to be. Yet, here she was. She stood outside the gates of the Alpha King's kingdom, carrying the weight of a decision that felt too heavy for anyone to bear. She had been the healer, the outcast, the one who was never meant to be involved in the politics and power of the royals. But now, she was the only one who could save him. The palace loomed before her, an ancient structure built from stone and steel, its walls lined with banners that bore the insignia of the royal family, a wolf's head crowned with thorns. It was a symbol of power, a symbol of the bloodline that had ruled these lands for centuries. The people revered their king, but they also feared him, and yet, in the stillness of the night, all Ilara could feel was uncertainty. The wolf's voice had echoed in her mind as she left the ruins of the temple. You must go to him. He cannot survive without you. His fate is bound to yours. Ilara had barely understood the meaning of those words, but there was no denying that something deep within her responded to them. It was like a call she couldn't ignore, a thread that tied her fate to Alaron's despite her best efforts to resist. Her steps felt heavy as she approached the entrance, the guards eyeing her warily as she passed. She was nothing but a stranger here, an outsider, a woman with no place in this world of kings and queens. Yet no one stopped her. They all seemed to know who she was, even if they didn't understand why she had come. As she entered the palace, the cold air gave way to warmth, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows on the stone walls. The air smelled of wood, incense, and something ancient, the scent of power. Ilara could feel it pressing in on her, making her skin crawl. She hated it. She was led through grand hallways and up winding staircases until she arrived at a large chamber, the door thick and imposing. The guards stepped aside, their eyes avoiding hers. They knew she wasn't welcome here. No Omega ever was. Inside the room, King Alaron lay in a massive bed, his strong features pale and strained. His usual regal presence was nowhere to be seen. His clothes, once immaculate, were now tattered, his skin damp with sweat. Ilara's heart clenched as she saw him. The mighty Alpha King reduced to nothing more than a man in need of help. The wolf had told her the truth. He was dying, Ilara. Alaron's voice was faint, but it still carried that commanding tone that Ilara had heard in her dreams. His eyes flickered open when she stepped closer, his gaze piercing, but it wasn't filled with anger as she had expected. Instead, it was filled with something much more vulnerable. Pain. How did you— Your wolf, she whispered, barely able to look him in the eye. I healed him. He led me here. Alaron's gaze sharpened, the light in his eyes shifting as if a part of him recognized what had happened. He didn't speak for a moment, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. You shouldn't have come, he said at last, his voice hoarse. This place is no place for you. Alara shook her head. I didn't come for this place. I came for you. You're not going to die? A bitter laugh escaped his lips. I'm already dying, he said softly. The poison has spread too far. My enemies are closer than you think. They knew what they were doing. Alara's heart twisted in her chest. But I can help. I healed your wolf. I can heal you. Alaron's expression softened for just a moment. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was there. You're a healer, but you're also an Omega. They will never accept you. I will never accept you. Alara recoiled at his words. The sting of his rejection hit her harder than she expected. She had been cast aside her whole life, but to hear those words from him, the king, the Alpha, it was as if everything she had ever feared was coming true. I don't need your acceptance, she whispered, her voice shaking but determined. I don't care about your throne or your kingdom. I only care about saving you. Alaron looked at her then, really looked at her. For the first time, there was something other than arrogance in his eyes, something raw, something human. You can't save me, not without paying the price. Alara felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She didn't want to ask, but she couldn't hold the question in any longer. What price? Alaron's eyes drifted to the ceiling as if he were searching for something, a way out, a way to explain it. The curse, he muttered. It's been placed on me for years. I thought I could fight it. But without the wolf, I'm nothing. And without you, I will die. Alara's pulse quickened. What are you saying? He turned his gaze back to her, his eyes dark with something that could only be described as regret. You're the one who's been chosen. The wolf, the curse. They're all connected. The moment you saved him, you bound yourself to me. Whether you know it or not, you're the only one who can break the curse. Alara felt a chill in her bones. You want me to be your Luna, she said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. Alaron nodded slowly, his face grim. Yes, it's the only way. The only way for me to survive. And for you, you will never be free unless you accept it. You are bound to me now. Her heart raced, her mind a whirlwind of confusion. The bond between them felt real, undeniable. But the weight of what he was asking, what he was offering, crushed her. A Luna. His Luna. She had spent her whole life running from anything that resembled power. And now she was being asked to claim it. To claim him. Alara closed her eyes, trying to block out the suffocating air around her. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be part of his world. But the wolf had shown her the truth. The curse was real, and it was her fate to help break it. I don't want this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I will help you. I'll do whatever it takes to save you. Alaron's eyes softened, the hardness in his face melting away for a moment. I didn't want this either, he whispered. But I need you, Alara. As the words hung between them, Alara felt something stir inside her, something she couldn't name. She was bound to him, bound to this kingdom, bound to a life she had never chosen. But in that moment, something shifted. The world outside the palace seemed to vanish, and only the two of them remained, caught in the delicate balance of fate. And as the darkness of the storm outside pressed against the walls of the palace, Alara knew one thing for sure. Her life had changed forever. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the royal palace, but inside, the air was thick with unease. Alara could feel it in the walls. The very stones that made up the castle seemed to tremble with the weight of the decision she had made. She had agreed to stay, agreed to help Alaron, but every moment felt like a silent battle. Her heart, torn between duty and desire, pulled her in different directions. Since that night when Alaron had confessed that she was bound to him, things had changed between them. They had not spoken of it again, but the tension was always there. A quiet hum in the background of every word. Every glance Alara had remained by Alaron's side, healing his wounds, using her gift to slowly, painstakingly rid his body of the poison that had taken root. But as his strength returned, so did the power dynamics of the palace. He was still the king, still the Alpha, still the man who commanded armies and ruled over the people, and she was still just the Omega, the healer, the outsider, but something had shifted. The curse, the wolf, the bond they shared. They had brought them together, and though she didn't fully understand it, Elara could feel it. Every time their hands brushed or their gazes met, it was as if something ancient, something powerful, stirred between them. Elara sat by Alaron's side as he rested in his chambers, the faintest glow from the fire flickering against the walls. He was looking stronger now, the color returning to his face, the heavy pallor that had once clouded him lifting, but there was still a lingering sadness in his eyes, a quiet despair that spoke of more than just the poison that had nearly killed him. "You've done it." Alaron's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone low but filled with gratitude. "You've saved me." Elara didn't respond at first. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass as she looked out the window, her gaze lost in the swirling night. The storm had passed, but it had left behind a heavy silence that seemed to seep into everything. "You think I've saved you?" Elara's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "You're not saved yet." Alaron frowned, his brows knitting together as he studied her. "What do you mean?" Elara looked at him, her expression a mixture of frustration and concern. "The curse is still here. The bond we share, it's not just magic, it's something more." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "The wolf, the magic we've both felt. It's not just the cure for your poison, Alaron. It's the key to something else. Something darker." Alaron shifted, his body still recovering but his mind sharp as ever. He regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "What are you saying?" Elara stood up, her hands trembling as she moved away from him, her thoughts spinning like the storm outside. "I don't know. I don't understand it. But I know that the bond between us is deeper than I realized. And it's not just about saving you. It's about power." Alaron remained silent for a moment, his gaze never leaving her. He seemed to be thinking deeply, his mind turning over her words. "You're afraid of the power," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "You're afraid of what it will make you become." Elara's heart skipped a beat. She had never been able to hide anything from him. Not now, not after everything that had happened. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I've always been afraid of power. It's not who I am. I was never meant to be a part of this world." Alaron's gaze softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. "But you are now, and you can't deny it. We are bound, Elara, you and I. It's not just magic. It's fate." She closed her eyes, struggling to accept his words. They felt true, but they also felt terrifying. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be part of his world. But somehow here she was, caught in the web of a destiny she hadn't chosen. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, and Elara could feel the weight of his gaze on her. She could feel the pull of the bond, the way it wove them together like two threads that could never be undone. She wasn't just the healer anymore. She was something more. She was his. Alaron stood up slowly, his movement still stiff but strong. He crossed the room toward her, his footsteps quiet on the stone floor. When he reached her, he paused, just a few inches away, his presence overwhelming. "Elara," his voice was hushed as if he were afraid of saying the wrong thing. "You don't have to be afraid of me." She shook her head, her throat tight with emotion. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, though the words felt hollow. "I'm afraid of what this will make me, what it will make you, what will become." Alaron reached out, his hand gently cupping her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. His touch was warm, grounding her in the moment. "We are already what we are, Elara," he said softly, "and we will become whatever we choose. The curse can be broken, but only if we accept what we are meant to be." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to pull away, to run from the intensity of his words, but she couldn't. The bond between them was too strong, too powerful, and she could feel the truth in his words. There was no turning back. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound in the room was the crackling of the fire, the flickering shadows dancing on the walls. And then, without warning, Alaron's lips were on hers. The kiss was slow, hesitant at first, as though they were both unsure of what they were doing. But it deepened quickly, the heat of it burning through the cold distance that had always separated them. Elara's heart raced as she kissed him back, her hands finding his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. When they finally pulled away, both breathless and shaken, Alaron spoke again, his voice low but firm. You are mine, Alara, and I am yours. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. There was no going back now. She could feel it in the depths of her soul. The curse, the bond, the power. It was all part of something greater than either of them had expected. And in that moment, Alara knew that her life had changed forever. But the question remained, could she accept the power that came with this bond? Could she embrace her place by his side, knowing the weight it would carry? The price of power had always been high, and now it seemed she was about to pay it. The night had fallen silent again, the palace resting beneath a blanket of snow that had begun to settle around the walls. But inside the royal chambers, Alara felt far from calm. The weight of the world pressed down on her, each passing moment more unbearable than the last. The decisions she had made, the choices she had embraced, they were leading her somewhere she couldn't yet see, somewhere that terrified her. Alaron's presence was a constant now. Since their kiss, since the moment they had both accepted the truth of what they had become, everything had changed. Alara had tried to convince herself she was still the same woman, the same healer who had once lived a quiet life alone. But deep inside she knew it wasn't true. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. Alaron had regained most of his strength, but the shadows of the curse still loomed over him. His enemies, the rival packs that had sought to bring him down, were still out there. And though the poison had left his body, the curse was far from broken. It had to be completed. The bond between them, the power they shared, it was the key. The price for breaking the curse had always been clear. Alara's life would never be the same. And though she had agreed to stand by Alaron, a part of her still resisted the idea that the price she had to pay was everything she had ever known. Her fingers traced the patterns of the ancient carvings on the wall as she stared out the window. The snowstorm had passed, leaving only the quiet cold of the night behind. Somewhere beyond the palace, the wind still howled as if nature itself knew the world was about to change. Alara? The voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned, finding Alaron standing in the doorway. His figure was framed by the soft glow of the torchlight, his silhouette strong and commanding even as he stood there with an unreadable expression on his face. "You've been quiet tonight," he said, stepping into the room. "You haven't said much since this morning." Alara felt her heart clench at his words. He wasn't wrong. She hadn't spoken much. The weight of everything, of the bond between them, of the looming battle with his enemies, of the curse that still tethered them together, it felt like too much to carry. "I'm thinking," she replied quietly, wondering if this is really the right path. Alaron's eyes softened, his usual stern expression melting into something more vulnerable. "You've already made your choice, Alara. You've chosen to stand with me. I need you. The curse needs you. Without you, He trailed off as if the weight of his own words was too heavy to bear. Alara didn't respond immediately, but something inside her shifted. She felt the bond between them pulsing beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. It wasn't just a curse anymore. It was something else, something she couldn't ignore. "I'm afraid," she whispered more to herself than to him. "Afraid of what will happen to us. Afraid of what I'll become if I stay." Alaron stepped forward, his hand reaching for hers. He didn't need to say anything. His touch was all the reassurance she needed. For the first time since she had come to the palace, Alara allowed herself to lean into him, to let him hold her close. "You're not alone in this," Alaron murmured, his voice low and steady. "We are bound. This is fate. And together, we can break the curse." Alara closed her eyes, letting his warmth soothe her, but doubt still lingered in the corners of her mind. Was it really fate? Or had they been forced into this by powers beyond their control? But before she could voice her fears, there was a sharp knock at the door. Alaron's grip on her hand tightened, and Alara felt a sudden shift in the air. His enemies were drawing near. "They're coming," Alaron said, his voice filled with cold determination. "They know what we're planning." The moment had arrived. The time for decisions had passed. Alara stood up, pulling away from him reluctantly. "What do we do now?" Alaron's eyes met hers, fierce and unwavering. "We fight. We face them together." The tension in the room was palpable. The curse was not just something to be broken with magic. It was something that had to be faced head-on, with courage and conviction. Alaron had been weakened by the poison, but now he was stronger than ever. And Alara, though she had no desire for power, felt the strength of the bond that tied her to him. She could not, would not, turn away. They left the room together, walking down the dimly lit hallways, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the palace. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide the threat that loomed closer. The royal guard stood at attention, their faces grim. Word had spread of the approaching attack, and with it, the final test of Alaron's reign, and of the curse that held them both in its grip. The war drums began to beat, a deep, rhythmic sound that echoed through the palace and beyond. The rival packs were closing in, their forces strong and determined, but they didn't know what awaited them. Alara and Alaron stood side by side on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, where the royal army had gathered, ready for battle. The cold wind bit at their faces, but neither of them moved. They had come too far to turn back now. "You're not alone," Alaron said again, his voice steady, as if he were trying to reassure himself as much as her. Alara nodded, her heart beating faster as the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. "We'll face it together," she replied, her voice more certain now. "We'll break the curse, together." The gates of the palace opened with a loud creak, and the enemy forces emerged from the shadows, their figures looming like ghosts in the night. But Alara wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The curse, the power, the bond, they were all part of her now. And she would not let it define her as a prisoner. She would break free of it. As the first wave of attackers charged toward them, Alaron stepped forward, his sword gleaming in the torchlight. He was the king, the alpha. But now he wasn't just a man of power. He was a man of love, of determination, of a future he would build alongside the woman who had saved him. And Alara stood beside him, ready to fight. Not for the kingdom, not for the throne, but for their future, for their bond, for their love. Together they would face the curse, and together they would break it.